Hey guys, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are looking at a date that changed, well, literally everything. June 28th, 1914.
Yeah, it really is the absolute pivot point of the modern world.
Right, so picture this scene. A 19-year-old high school student, Gavrilo Princip, is standing on a street corner in Sarajevo. He pulls a trigger, assassinating Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie. And somehow, that one single moment ends up killing 20 million people.
It is, it's a staggering number, you know? And it wasn't just the massive loss of life. That one event led to the collapse of ancient empires. The Ottoman, the Austro-Hungarian, the Russian...
It basically redrew the map of the entire world.
Exactly, a conflict spanning continents.
Yeah.
But to understand it, we really have to look past just the shooting itself.
Right, because it's mind-blowing that a teenager with a gun could cause that much chaos. It feels like, well, like lighting a match.
A match is, yeah, that's the core metaphor we need to use here. The assassination was just a matchstick. If you light a matchstick in an empty room, you know, it just burns out and nothing happens.
But Europe in 1914 wasn't an empty room.
Not at all. It was a mountain of dynamite that had been piling up for decades.
So the matchstick didn't create the explosion, it just set it off. Right. The explosives were already rigged.
Precisely. Our mission today is to figure out who piled up all that dynamite in the first place. We need to understand not just how the war started, but why the world was so ready to burn.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because I think we've all had this thought at some point. If we could go back in a time machine and stop that one bullet from being fired, if we just tackled Gavrilo Princip, would World War I have never happened?
That is the big what if, isn't it? The classic time traveler's dilemma. But the reality is, unfortunately, not that simple. If we look at the history, it's clear that while the assassination was the trigger, the war likely would have happened anyway.
So stopping Princip wouldn't have worked?
Probably not. There was a long, complex chain of deep tensions driving it. The pressure was so high that if it hadn't been Princip, it would have been something else a month later.
So the dynamite was already there. Let's talk about where this dynamite came from. It starts in the Balkans, right? This area was known as the powder keg of Europe for a reason.
It does. We have to go back to 1878. The Ottoman Empire, which had controlled that region for centuries, was known as the sick man of Europe. They were crumbling. And as they retreated, they left a massive power vacuum.
Nature hates a vacuum, so Austria-Hungary steps in.
They do. After a war between Russia and the Ottomans, the Treaty of Berlin in 1878 gave the Austro-Hungarian Empire the right to administer Bosnia-Herzegovina. They were supposed to just be babysitting.
Babysitting, right.
But in 1908, Austria decided they didn't want to babysit anymore. They annexed Bosnia completely. They made it an official part of their empire.
Which brings us to the motive. Because the people living there, the Bosnians, the Serbs, they aren't Austrian. They were Slavs.
Yes, and they had this dream of a united country. Yugoslavia or Land of the South Slavs.
Free from Austrian rule.
Exactly. So when Austria swoops in, it's not just a land grab. It is crushing a national dream. Serbia, the neighboring country, was furious. They looked at Bosnia and said, "Those are our people."
So you have this massive, decaying Austro-Hungarian empire trying to hold on to power, colliding with this young, aggressive Serbian nationalism.
And that collision point is where we find Gavrilo Princip. He wasn't just a lone nut, he was part of a revolutionary group wanting independence. But here is the crazy part. The assassination itself was almost a complete failure. It was a comedy of errors until the very last second.
It really was.
There were actually several assassins lined up along the route the Archduke's motorcade was taking. The first one froze. The second one, a revolutionary named Kabrinovich, actually threw a bomb.
But he missed.
He missed. The bomb bounced off the car and exploded in the street behind them.
So the Archduke is safe.
Right. And Ferdinand even escaped, went to the town hall, but later he decided to go visit the injured people in the hospital.
But nobody told the drivers the route had changed. This is the pivot point right here. The driver takes a wrong turn.
Yes. The driver took a wrong turn. When they realized it, they tried to correct the route. The driver slammed on the brakes to reverse, but the car stalled.
And it stalled just 5 feet away from Gavrilo Princip.
Exactly. Princip was just standing there. And suddenly, his target is sitting right in front of him. He stepped up and fired.
So one wrong turn changes history. But how does a local murder in Bosnia drag the entire world, including places like India and Japan, into a massive war?
That is where the chain of friendship comes in, the alliance systems. It wasn't just Austria versus Serbia.
Walk us through the dominoes. Because it seems like everyone just jumped in.
Okay, so Austria-Hungary is furious and declares war on Serbia. But Serbia has a big brother, Russia. Russia sees itself as the protector of all Slavs, so they step in to save Serbia.
So if Austria attacks Serbia, they're essentially fighting Russia.
Correct. But Austria-Hungary has its own old friend, Germany. When Russia steps in, Germany feels they have to step in to help Austria-Hungary.
And then it spreads west.
Right. France joins to support Russia. And then Britain gets involved due to treaties, specifically the Triple Entente, and because of the invasion of neutral territories.
It is like a bar fight where one guy punches another, and suddenly everyone's friends are jumping in.
That is a very accurate description, and there is one critical moment here. The blank check.
This is Germany giving permission.
Yes. Germany gave Austria-Hungary a blank check. Unconditional support to do whatever they wanted, which heavily emboldened Austria to attack.
It sounds like everyone was just waiting for an excuse to fight. What was really driving these countries to be so aggressive? Was it just loyalty?
Loyalty was the cover story. The real engine driving this was imperialism and greed.
You mean looting?
Basically, yes. Monarchs and empires wanted to expand their borders to exploit resources and labor. This was the era of the scramble for Africa, where European powers raced to colonize the continent.
Looking for gold and raw materials.
Exactly. Some view this as the highest stage of capitalism, using military force to secure markets and profits. Henry Ford actually had a view on this, noting that capitalism and militarism were deeply linked.
Okay, so the kings and businessmen wanted money and land. I get that. But why did millions of common people agree to go die in muddy trenches for them?
That brings us to the sales pitch aggressive nationalism.
The whole, my country is the best vibe.
Yes, and that others are inferior. The media played a massive role in this. Newspapers and poetry glorified war.
Like the Charge of the Light Brigade mentality.
Exactly, portraying military blunders as heroic sacrifice. You had poets like Rupert Brooke who portrayed death in war as something beautiful and glorious.
But there were practical reasons too, right?
Yes, employment. Being a soldier was a job for the poor and unemployed. It was sold as a noble profession and a reliable way to earn a living.
It seems like the leaders had total control. But looking at who was in charge, is it true that this whole war was basically a massive family feud?
It is bizarrely true. It has a real Game of Thrones aspect to it. If you look at the three major cousins involved, King George V of Britain, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, and Tsar Nicholas II of Russia.
Literally first cousins.
Yes. They were all monarchs with little regard for democracy, except partially in Britain and France. And Kaiser Wilhelm II is often described as particularly hot-tempered.
Did anyone try to stop him?
Queen Victoria, their grandmother, had tried to keep the peace. But after she died, the family relationships just couldn't stop the political machinery.
So we have cousins fighting cousins. But as the war dragged on, did the soldiers on the ground keep believing the propaganda, or did they realize what was actually happening?
The reality check hit hard. We see a massive shift in the poetry.
Contrasting the pro-war stuff.
Exactly. Poets like Wilfred Owen and Thomas Hardy, who wrote The Man Who Killed, started depicting the grim reality. They wrote about poisonous fumes, men coughing blood.
And realizing the enemy was just another person.
Right. Realizing the enemy was just another unemployed man trying to feed his family. Not everyone supported the war either. There was political opposition from socialists, the Labor Party, and the Bolsheviks in Russia.
There's a famous story about a moment where the fighting actually stopped. Did the soldiers ever just decide not to fight?
They did. The Christmas Truce of 1914.
Soldiers just came out of the trenches.
Yes. British and German soldiers came out of the trenches into no man's land. They exchanged food, sang songs, and celebrated together.
It showed that the common soldiers had no personal quarrel with them.
Exactly. But the commanders were furious. They ordered the fighting to restart and threatened to shoot their own soldiers if they refused.
That is brutal.
It is. And later in the war, there were actual mutinies. Mutinies in the French army and the Russian Revolution, where soldiers turned against their own rulers.
When the dust finally settled after 4 years, who was actually to blame for all this destruction?
Historians still debate this. There are a few main suspects.
Germany is usually the first one blamed.
Yes, for the blank check in invading neutral Belgium and France. But then there's Austria-Hungary for being the first to actually declare war.
And Russia.
Russia is blamed for being the first to fully mobilize its army, which made war inevitable. Even Britain is argued over. Some say if Britain had been clearer about supporting France earlier, Germany might not have attacked.
So it wasn't just one villain.
No, It was a systemic failure of leadership, greed, and alliances.
We know about the borders changing, but what was the human cost that lasted even after the treaties were signed?
The immediate legacy was devastating. The movement of troops helped spread the deadly 1918 Spanish flu pandemic.
That killed an enormous number of people.
Between 20 and 50 million dead. Then there was massive social change. Women entered the workforce in huge numbers to replace men.
Which led to the suffragette movement.
Right, and women eventually getting the vote. And finally, technology. The introduction of tanks, machine guns, and aerial combat changed warfare forever.
Looking back at 1914 versus today, could a matchstick moment like that trigger a world war again? Or have we learned our lesson?
That is the core question. While we have institutions like the UN now, the core elements of nationalism, military buildups, and alliances, they all still exist.
The mountain of dynamite is still there.
In many ways, yes. The lesson is to recognize the mountain of dynamite before someone lights a match.
It really makes you think. The final thought I want to leave you guys with is that image we discussed. The men who killed each other in 1914 would have likely been friends if they met in a bar instead of a battlefield. It makes you wonder how much of our current conflicts are real and how much is just a story told by leaders.
A very powerful thought to end on.
Absolutely. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please like, subscribe, and share.